A basic game of Mythic Mischief is a contest between two factions in a magical school, both vying to get the other faction in trouble with the dark figure of authority, the Tome Keeper. To begin a game, the players choose two factions and decide who will be on each team. This being a tutorial, we'll just stick to 2 players, and they decide to play as wizards and zombies. Each team collects their starting pieces and places their number cubes in the starting positions marked by the dots. These number cubes should also be turned so their number matches the number above them on the board, like so. Also, in the bottom corner, place a tome in the legendary ability for your faction. So that's the player setup. Now for the rest of the game. We're going to take the detention deck and put it back in the box. That's for the solo version of this game, which I'll probably cover in a future video. Next, shuffle the before lunch deck and the after lunch deck and draw a card from each. Place the before lunch card face up in its slot and place the after lunch card face down in its slot. The Tome Keeper goes in the middle of the board. Next, let's take a look at the before lunch card and see what it tells us to do. The numbered squares on the card tell us where the destination tiles should be placed. These are the waypoints that the Tome Keeper will follow in their phase of the game. After placing the destinations, we will check to see where the tomes should be placed. On each square marked with a cube, both teams place one of their tomes. After this, the players set up the bookcases and clutter tokens by either following one of the layouts in the book or by taking turns placing pieces. The bookcases are not allowed to be placed on the outer edges of the library or block off entire sections of the board. Fire codes or something, I guess. So that's pretty much set up. All that's left is for the players to decide which team goes first, and since that's a really big advantage, the team going second gets an extra tome that they can use at the start of the game to upgrade one of their abilities. We'll talk about tomes and upgrading a little later, but yeah, this is a really big boost. The player going first places all of their characters, otherwise known as Mythics, anywhere on the board that doesn't already have a tome, a character, or a Tome Keeper on it. And then, the second player does the same. Now, it's the first player's turn. The goal of the game of Mythic Mischief is to be the first to gain 10 Mischief points, or to have the most points when the Tome Keeper reaches the last destination after lunch. To gain Mischief points, a player causes the Tome Keeper to land on other teams' characters. If you do this on your turn, you gain 1 Mischief point per opposing character caught. But beware, if your character is caught on your turn, you lose a Mischief point. On a player's turn, there are 2 phases. There's that player's phase, and then the Tome Keeper's phase. During the player's phase, they have a few abilities, as their board indicates. First off, they have the number of times they can move. As you can see here, the number of spaces that this team can move per turn is 3. Characters cannot move through bookcases in this way, and spaces with clutter on them cost double to move into. If a character steps onto a tile with a tome of their color, they can pick it up to use later. One last rule about moving is your characters can move through the opponent's characters, but cannot stop on the same space. And no, you can't move through the Tome Keeper. Next down on the board is your faction's ability to move faction characters that may or may not belong to your faction. For instance, this zombie ability allows you to move a faction character that is adjacent to a zombie 1 space in a diagonal direction. The wizards, on the other hand, can switch places with an opponent character if they are within 1 space of them. One rule to remember is you can never push a character into the Tome Keeper, but you can move them into the path of the Tome Keeper, so keep that in mind. After that, we have the faction ability to move bookcases. All factions move bookcases in different ways, but as in setup, they need to follow fire safety protocols and not put any of the bookcases against the outer walls or block off a section of the library completely. The last track on the player board is the Distract ability, where your characters can draw the Tome Keeper 1 space closer to them. If he catches anyone on the way, the active player scores accordingly. Lastly, we have the faction's legendary action and the After Lunch Special. A faction's legendary action is a powerful ability that can only be played when a tome occupies the slot. Once the action is taken, the tome is removed from the game. Likewise, the After Lunch Special is another powerful ability that in my experience always includes some sort of token. As the name implies, this ability only becomes available when the game enters the second stage, after lunch. When a player uses an action, they roll down the die for that action to keep track of how many they have left, and once they've run out, or choose to end their phase, it's the Tome Keeper's phase. The Tome Keeper is a simple soul. He only walks from point 1 to point 2 to point 3 at the speed indicated on the current stage card. Any mythics that he lands on are removed from the board, and the active player scores accordingly. He will always take the quickest path, and if there are 2 or more ways that are the same distance, the active player chooses which path he takes. Keep in mind that cluttered tiles take 2 points to enter and affect the Tome Keeper as well. Once the Tome Keeper is finished moving, the active player's turn ends with the cleanup phase. On a player's cleanup phase, they slide all used action cards to the left to fill any gaps. If they didn't use a die, it remains where it is. Next, the player takes the tomes they found on their turn and use each of them to either upgrade an ability or refill the legendary ability slot if you used it earlier. To upgrade an ability, slide the action dice over and fill the new slot with a tome, like so. This permanently upgrades the ability and gives you way more options on your turn. After this, the player is allowed to boost 2 dice, moving them 1 space to the right. You can split the boost between 2 abilities or only boost 1, but remember that you can only move 1 die per boost. Looking at you, movement. Once you finish sliding your dice around, turn all of them so the numbers match the numbers above them, and that's the end of this player's turn. Before the next player starts their turn, they return their captured mythics to the board on any of the spaces marked with circles on the current stage card, or any unoccupied space if all of those are taken. The game continues like this until the Tome Keeper reaches the 3rd objective on his route. If he has extra movement, he moves back towards his starting point in the center, and that's the end of the before lunch stage. Flip the after lunch stage card and remove any tomes left on the board. Place the new destination tokens and add new tomes where they are indicated. Notice that the Tome Keeper's speed may have changed, and now your faction may use their after lunch special ability. The game continues until the Tome Keeper reaches the 3rd after lunch destination marker, or one team reaches 10 points. Highest score wins, and in case of a tie, the player with the least amount of tomes on their board wins. And so, those are the basics of Mythic Mischief, and if you enjoy the base game, they have faction expansions and a sequel game that I may be able to cover in the future. Until next time, this is Hogwash, over and out. Catch you later.